Hello, future teachers! Welcome back to the Tower Languages TKT Academy. I'm glad you're here and ready to continue improving your teaching skills. In today's lesson, we're going to explore one of the key topics from Cambridge TKT Module 1, Unit 3, Phonology, Part 2, Breaking Down Phonology. By the end of this lesson, you'll understand the essential concepts, see practical classroom examples, become a more confident English teacher, and be better prepared for the TKT exam. So let's get started.
So, why does phonology actually matter to English teachers? Well, it's the fundamental engine behind pronunciation, listening comprehension, and ultimately overall intelligibility. Building directly on our previous phonology lesson, today we're mapping out the architectural blueprint of spoken English.
Here's our builder's journey for today. First, vowels and consonants. 2, the dynamic diphthongs. 3, word stress and schwa. 4, phonology and business. 5, connected speech flow. And finally, takeaways and reflection. Let's dive right into Section 1, Vowels and Consonants. Okay, so the core difference between written and spoken English is absolutely crucial here. In writing, we build words with letters, but in spoken English, we build them with phonemes. Those are the smallest units of sound that can actually change the meaning of a word. Now, because English spelling is, let's face it, famously chaotic and deeply inconsistent, we map out the language using these 44 distinct sounds. These phonemes fall into 3 main groups. You've got monophthongs, which are your pure vowels, diphthongs, which are the gliding vowels, and consonants. Teaching these phonemes is incredibly powerful because it literally unlocks dictionary literacy for your students. Let's zoom in a bit on pure vowels, or monophthongs. The absolutely crucial point here is the role of duration and muscular tension. English has about 12 pure vowel sounds, and they're categorized as either short or long. Short vowels are super quick and relaxed, like the short I sound in the word ship. On the flip side, long vowels, which you'll often see marked by those 2 little dots in phonetic transcription, require sustained duration and a lot more muscular tension. Think of the long E sound in sheep. When you teach this in your classroom, actually have your students physically smile a bit and tense their facial muscles to get that long E sound right. Transitioning over to consonants, we're looking at sounds that are produced by restricting airflow using the lips, teeth, tongue, or throat. And this brings us to the most critical concept for consonants, voicing. Seriously, go ahead and try this yourself right now. Place your fingers lightly on the front of your throat. For an unvoiced sound like the P sound in park, say it out loud. You'll only feel air passing, absolutely no vibration. But for its voiced pair, the B sound in bus, you'll instantly feel your vocal cords vibrate, creating this very distinct buzz against your fingers. Using this exact physical feedback with your students instantly fixes so many common pronunciation errors. So you might be wondering, why do we care quite so much about these individual sounds? Well, we show students why through minimal pairs. Changing just one single phoneme completely alters the object you're talking about. Just think about the vowel change we just discussed. A relaxed, short I gives us a ship that sails on the ocean, but a tense, stretched E gives us a sheep that eats grass. And it's the exact same logic with consonants. Change the unvoiced F sound to a voiced V sound, and suddenly a fan becomes a van. Getting accuracy at this micro level is the absolute foundation of intelligibility. All right, moving on to Section 2, the dynamic diphthongs. A diphthong is an essential sound for achieving a natural-sounding flow, but it really often confuses learners. Because diphthongs are frequently spelled with 2 separate vowel letters, students intuitively try to pronounce them as 2 entirely separate sounds. The most important thing to teach your students here is that a diphthong is not 2 separate sounds. Instead, it's a single dynamic movement. It's a phonetic glide that starts in one vowel position and travels toward another, all within the exact same syllable. Notice how these glides actually work, depending on the direction the tongue moves. Let's take the A sound, for example. It starts with the standard at sound and smoothly glides upward toward an it sound. You hear this dynamic movement perfectly in the word sales, sales, as in sales increased this month. If a student doesn't make that glide and just uses a flat vowel, the word sounds completely unnatural and can literally lose its intended meaning. Let's keep building. Section 3, word stress and schwa. Now that we've established our individual sounds, our vowels, consonants, and diphthongs, let's look at how they behave under pressure when we combine them into words. English is a rhythm-driven language. We absolutely do not pronounce every syllable with equal strength. Word-level stress is that extra emphasis we give to certain syllables. Primary stress, which is marked with a top vertical line in the dictionary, dictates this rhythm. It's the loudest, longest, and highest pitched syllable. In longer words, you might also have secondary stress, marked with a bottom line, which is weaker but definitely still there. And what's truly fascinating is how the unstressed vowel literally shrinks down to let the stressed one stand out. And what exactly does it shrink into? Well, the schwa. The schwa is actually the most common sound in the entire English language. And here's the key rule to remember. It is never stressed. To make those primary stressed syllables pop, the unstressed vowels physically shrink into this ultra-short neutral grunt. Think of the word computer. The first O and the final both shrink into a schwa so that the middle syllable, pew, can carry the full weight of the word stress.
Section 4. Phonology in Business.
Understanding this phonological structure is one thing, but applying it is another. In the corporate world, word stress can literally dictate the definition of a word. We call this the corporate stress shift. When the primary stress is on the first syllable, the word acts as a noun, a contract, an increase, a refund. But if we shift that exact same stress to the second syllable, it becomes a verb, to contract, to increase, to refund. And here is where the magic really happens for your B1 and B2 students. Notice that when the stress shifts to the second syllable, that first syllable loses its power and is almost always forced to shrink right back down into a schwa. This leads us to a really vital teaching application. Let's be clear, having a perfect native-like accent is entirely unnecessary in international business. However, phonemic clarity is absolutely mandatory. If your student lacks vowel precision and, say, confuses the short A sound in bad with the short E sound in bed, they create instant misunderstandings. Similarly, mastering those difficult unvoiced and voiced consonant pairs, like the unvoiced th in think versus the voiced the in this, instantly elevates a student's perceived language proficiency and projects real professional authority. All right, moving into the final layer of our blueprint, Section 5, Connected Speech Flow. We've built the individual sounds and the words, but native speakers just don't speak in isolated chunks. So let's explore how they naturally glue it all together. English features what we call a stressed timed rhythm. This means the beat of a sentence is determined by the strong, stressed words, not the total number of syllables. Native speakers emphasize content words. Those are the nouns and verbs like went and office. And they shrink down the function words like the prepositions to the. To maintain this fast rhythm, native speakers also heavily use contractions, turning I am into I'm. In business English, teaching students to compress these words saves time and creates a natural, approachable tone, rather than sounding rigid or robotic. A massive part of that rhythm is linking, which is basically the invisible glue of spoken English. In natural conversation, words just don't exist as separate units. The end of one word physically joins the beginning of the next. For example, let's look at linking a consonant to a vowel. The word turn ends in a consonant, and on starts with a vowel. They link magnetically to become turn on. Or consider linking a vowel to a vowel. When we say go out, our mouths naturally insert an invisible W sound to bridge the gap smoothly, resulting in go out. Because of this linking, our students face the word boundary challenge. To a learner, it often sounds like native English speakers are just swallowing their words whole. In written English, boundaries are clear spaces on a page. But in spoken English, those spaces are completely erased. This means two completely different phrases can sound exactly the same. A name and an aim both sound identical. Tell her and teller both sound identical too. This is exactly why we have to train our students to stop trying to listen for every single individual word and instead train them to listen for meaning units derived entirely from the context of the conversation. And that brings us to Section 6, Takeaways and Reflection. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, all the way from the micro-level phoneme to the macro-level flow of connected speech. Here are your 3 most important takeaways from today's blueprint. First, phonemes and voicing dictate accuracy. Second, stress shifts change word meanings, and unstressed syllables shrink into the schwa. And finally, connected speech and linking are what actually create natural fluency. Think about the pronunciation difficulties your students commonly experience. How could today's lesson help you address one of those difficulties? Congratulations! You have just completed another important TKT lesson. Remember that passing the TKT exam is not about memorizing definitions. It's about understanding how teaching works in real classrooms and becoming a better English teacher. Now it's time to put today's lesson into practice. Visit Tower Languages and continue your learning with resources designed especially for English teachers. There you'll find lesson summaries, downloadable teaching resources, exam-style practice, and more. The link is in the description below. In the next lesson, we will take a close look at Unit 4, Functions. Remember, great teachers are made one lesson at a time. See you in the next lesson.